Hey everyone, it's Saraya Walters, and we're back with another episode of the Purposeful Professional Podcast, the podcast for the people, your career, and the culture. During this episode, I had the privilege of interviewing Wafa Adami, Algerian product manager and former journalist. This episode exemplifies the power of using and translating your creativity across domains in quest for a multifaceted impact. From our discussion on gender equity and equality in journalism, to navigating dual cultures as a child, even to the differences between working in one creative field like journalism and switching into another innovative field like tech. If you are curious about switching careers and using your transferable skills and cultural upbringing to make an impact in a new career, this is the episode for you. Let's hop in and take a listen to this amazing conversation. And hello, everybody. This is Saraya Walters from The Purposeful Professional. I'm here with today's guest, Wafa Adami. She is a project management maven, okay? She's a product management maven, and she's here to share her expertise with us, but also her journey from journalism into tech. Wafa, introduce yourself to the people on the podcast.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Saraya. Thank you so much for having me. I'm fangirling at the moment just because I'm a fan of Saraya and the work she's doing and the podcast. I've been a listener for a while, so I'm so glad to be here. I'm Wafa. I'm 25 years old. I just turned 25 in the past December. I'm a Capricorn, and like Saraya said, I'm a project manager, product owner by profession. I've been doing it for around 5 years now in multiple fields, and it's what I excel in. It's what I like.
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you for saying that you're a fan. Because let me tell you. So TPP, we have our first actual listener on the podcast. This is super exciting. I'm excited to have you. Super excited to be connected in this space as well. And yeah, shout out to LinkedIn for making these connections possible. I think LinkedIn has actually really changed the way how we even view our professional world. So thank you, LinkedIn, for making these sort of connections possible. All right, so we want to start right away with our pop purpose segment. And this is where we have our guests talk about areas within pop culture that are relevant to their own expertise. So I want to talk to you a little bit about sports journalism and gender equality / stereotypes. As you might know, we are facing the Super Bowl this week. So in America, we have the Super Bowl and we actually have the Chiefs and the 49ers playing. So people are getting hype. You know, we have a super fan, football fan culture in America where people will paint their body a certain color and their fight with the other team's fans on Reddit and Facebook. And there's a lot that has been going on. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the gender equality struggles that journalists, specifically sports journalists, that are women face in the United States and in other contexts. So here's some background for today's Pop Purpose segment. In honor of this week being the Super Bowl, we want to discuss the impact of women in sports journalism. While their impact has been celebrated and is getting more recognition, there is still a long way to go. And we linked to a video which discusses how journalist Jemele Hill spoke about the discrimination that women face in sports journalism, stating that men oftentimes think that their knowledge comes from their genitalia. So Jemele Hill is a truth teller. She went for the jugular. So my first question for you is, what do you think about the struggles that women face in journalism, particularly in male-dominated sectors of journalism, such as sports journalism?
Yeah. I mean, amen to that. I feel like, and just to refer back to the America's craziness about football, it's same here, but it's with soccer. People get crazy around kind of finals and stuff like that. So it's fun. It's fun to see the craziness, all over the world with a few different sports. Going back to the kind of the subject of sports journalism and journalism as a whole, I think it's quite unfortunate the fact that it's a global phenomenon that women journalists face this struggle. Um, you know, uh, we're quite unrepresented in the area of journalism as a whole, but especially in sports journalism, especially here in Algeria, North Africa as a whole. Let's say, in my own experience, and even though I wasn't really particularly, a journalist when it comes to writing sports, I was more covering international news. But we had a sports kind of news room where it was 99 kind of percent dominated by men, and you could see kind of the disparateness, or I'd say the fact that women were not kind of respected, they weren't present. It's quite unfortunate, I'd say. I mean, women face this problem in journalism as a whole, but especially when it comes to sports, because they don't just get taken seriously. whether it's in the classroom, in college, we're all taking, journalism courses, and even when you graduate and you're trying to find work as a sport journalist, there's no opportunities. And even if you land the opportunity, you're surrounded in a room of men, so you don't get kind of the same chances as they get to go to events. You don't get taken as seriously as they should. Yeah, so I mean, like I said, it's quite unfortunate to see that this is happening across a few different countries in the world.
Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate. And I think a lot of what you said is a lot of women's experiences in journalism. We could say journalism is like people would say in America, it's like female centric. I don't necessarily think it is. I think we still do kind of believe that men are better at expressing themselves than women, particularly when it comes to scholarly expression. So journalism is, in my opinion, it's an art form. It's a subset of writing, and it can be very scholarly. And for that reason alone, having to deduce things and put together ideas, journalism can seem to favor the presence of men and their ideals more than women, especially when it comes to things like sports, which is a traditionally masculine terrain, especially when you get into things like football, which is pretty much a manly terrain in America. So I think that you're right in that there are definitely limited opportunities in journalism in general. But when you are a woman, there's a specific type of experience that you have that limits your scope even further. And it's funny that even in Algeria, that you're having the same struggles that we're having in the US with understanding what are the gifts and the perspectives that a woman journalist brings to the table that a man might not, and how can we value that instead of making it seem as if she's not smart enough or not intelligent enough or doesn't understand this sport, for example, because she's not a man. So these are these that we're facing the same things. The United Nations has gender equality as a sustainable development goal because it is not just a United States thing, it is a united world thing. Like it is a everyone thing. And I think journalism represents just, it's a microcosm of what's going on in a lot of other sectors and industries. So my second question for you is, do you think it is a female journalist's responsibility to make sure that they feel respected? If so, or if not, what can men do to increase women's ability to thrive in the male dominated sect of sports journalism?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a brilliant question. I feel like when it comes to a lot of this disparity between the women's the problems that women face, excuse me, and when it comes to, like you said, this is a global issue. Some people assume gender roles and the issues that it comes with. It's kind of just it's limited, but it applies to so many different aspects, and we all face it, and you feel the real life consequences of all of this, and especially in the case of women's presence in journalism and sports journalism specifically. I feel like it's sad the fact that this responsibility falls on women to fix. I really hate this notion that women should be the ones that take the action to fix this problem, and because this was really imposed on us, so it doesn't really fall on women. I think men should take the action and the lead to close the gap. I think when it comes to women's presence in the newsroom, they should be the voice that stands up and says, "Oh, I don't have any women coworkers with me in the newsroom. Why is that? Why are men not going to the editors and asking for more female presence in the sports section?" Yeah, I mean, it's just about them backing us up, not really about kind of the women journalists. Because I feel like in a lot of spaces, you try to go above and beyond, and you try to show up more. You try to be kind of more knowledgeable, and you try to even blend in some cases. I know I did this in the past in my few roles as a journalist. You go to events and you try to kind of blend in with the guys. Yeah, but it's quite sad because you shouldn't be forced to kind of blend in. It should be about the men kind of advocating for you, you know?
Yeah, 100% everything that you said, I agree with, especially that part about blending in. I think, like, especially when you get into these male dominated spaces, in the United States, we'll call it the old boys club. When you get into these spaces, you feel like you have to, suppress yourself. You feel like you can't really be yourself. There's certain workplaces where, exactly, make yourself smaller. Like there's certain workplaces where if you wear a pink dress, girl, you get thrown out of the place. Like we don't want you in here. You should be wearing black and white. You can't even wear a skirt. You should be wearing a suit. So I think that there has been this suppression almost of I don't femininity in certain spaces, and not necessarily traditional femininity, but the presence of women. Wherever women are, we bring femininity, right? So the presence of femininity, there's been a rejection of that in favor of the, I don't want to get into it too much, but people would say like patriarchal cultural norms, which many societies run by. I know in the United States we run by that, and I'm pretty sure in Algeria it's probably the same, where the men tend to set the tone. And I agree with you. The women are not responsible and should not be held responsible. Absolutely not. They should not be held responsible for, like you said so eloquently, a situation that has been put on them, a situation that has been placed on them. They're not responsible for that. So it is about men understanding their power. And in the United States, there's this podcast debate. I'm pretty sure it might be happening on the African continent as well, where it's like, this is what a woman should be doing. This is
Yeah,
what a man
yeah.
should be doing. And people are
Podcast
going back
wars
and
and stuff.
forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole thing called
It
passport bros and
transcends.
podcast bros, and like so much is happening that's so negative. But I think like when I think of what a man can do at the highest level, they like to talk about being an alpha male and all this other nonsense. What a man can do at the highest level is support and back women. And I'm ready to see the new masculine, which is what I call the new masculine, being in support of women, men being in support of women and championing the interests of women, because I think that is the highest thing a man can do. Be a supporter of women, because women are so wonderful. We give life, we do so many things. So I think being a supporter of women is the number one thing a man can do. And I agree that they need to begin to embrace that within different male dominated contexts, such as journalism.
I really think that's kind of true allyship. I think when people talk about being an ally to women, that's how it should play out. You should be able to kind of speak up, because if the woman isn't heard, they don't place as value on our voices and our opinions as much as you do. You should take the lead and kind of speak up and be a true ally for women. I mean, one of my closest colleagues was a middle-aged man that stood up for me in the newsroom. People that um, take kind of action, and they make sure that you're okay, that you're heard, that you're represented, and that you're given assignments. Sometimes suppression in the newsroom, especially, it happens in subtle ways, but you can feel it as a woman.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Wafa. That was an amazing pop purpose segment, very meaningful. We got into our gender equality bag, we got into our gender studies bag, and we were able to talk a lot about the different things that can happen, especially in the journalism industry. Thank you for highlighting your experience in journalism. I think that is so important. Your lived experience is really going to make that segment very impactful for the listener. So thank you so much. All right, so let's get into you, because the Purpose of Professional podcast is the podcast for the people, the career, and the culture, right? So we're thinking a lot about you as a person. So let's get into your story. I want you to take me back to your upbringing in Algeria. Like, when did you know you were a creative person? And what was that first spark or that moment of creativity for you?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I mean, like I said, I was born here in Algeria and I grew up for a few years here. I was a military brat, so we did move around a lot as kids. You're forced to move around in a few different places. You relocate. You have to kind of grow your roots in a few different places. So I was kind of forced to be a sociable person, even though I was extremely kind of introverted as a kid. I was pretty shy, but that forces you to kind of make friends, to really get to know people more and come out of your shell. We moved around in Algeria here for a while. Afterwards, I did move to Syria for around, I say, 8 years. And in that point, I did start my education. So I did a lot of my schooling, secondary as well as middle school. We ended up moving back here to Algeria after that, and I continued my education. I continued high school here in Algeria, which was kind of a culture shock, to be honest, because in Syria, I did kind of, you grow up, especially as an international, kind of in an international community when you move around. So I attended international schools. It was a mix of different cultures. English was the primary language. And coming back here to Algeria, which is quite francophone, here it's all kind of French and Arabic. I was kind of forced to learn the language all over again, grow my roots all over again. Compelled to kind of make friends and stuff like that. So I continued high school here. I got my, I don't know what you call it back in the States, but here it's baccalaureate, which is the high school graduation certificate. yeah, and afterwards, like I said, I did my bachelor's in journalism and communication. After that, I was kind of curious to continue in the realm of communication, so I did my master's in public relations and communication as well. Currently, I'm just doing another degree for law, another degree for fun. I'm doing a law degree, just in my spare time. Yeah, so that's kind of a glimpse about me.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of things that I want to unpack during this episode. So number one, I'm hearing that you have this these dual cultures that you were torn between as a child, this Algerian culture and then this Syrian culture. And one of the things that I notice about very creative people as well as people with transferable skills, because you're doing that product management now, but then you're doing that law degree for fun, but you also were a journalist. So I'm noticing this like transferability in your path. One of the things that I notice a lot is that many of them were dual culture kids or grew up in different cultures or grew up in different subcultures and contexts. So there's this thing of having to navigate diversity at a very young age that I think makes people very, very creative and makes people very, very willing to take risk and step outside of the box. Literally, you came on here and said you're doing a law degree for fun. How many people would, that is an amazing thing. And I want to highlight that because how many people would actually say they're doing a law degree for fun? Not many. I mean, like law is seen as hard, intellectually challenging. I gotta say it, especially abroad. It's seen as very intellectually challenging, but that shows me that you're the type of person that likes to seek out those challenges. And when you talked about having to assimilate back to Algeria after living in Syria, it highlighted just your resilience and your ability to also understand and adapt to different cultures. So I think those are some of the things that made you creative and made you be able to work in various contexts. Would you say that is true?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I think you can even resonate with this because I know you come from different cultures and you're quite creative as well. I think you did journalism as well, and now you're venturing into podcasting. Yeah, it's quite the case. A lot of people that I know that I grew up with that had kind of the same background, we were kind of forced to be multifaceted in some aspects. You kind of have to learn to excel in a few different cultures in a few different contexts, and that kind of grew up with me. I'd say as an adult, I found myself really hating having a lot of free time. So whenever I find something interested in, and I'm always kind of curious to know about things, I'm always curious to find a new area that I can excel in. And yeah, and that definitely kind of always kind of goes back to the root, not to be kind of very psychological or analyzing the situation a lot, but it always goes back to your childhood. I grew up in an international school, so we did a lot of like few different classes. You learn how to sew, you learn how to code, you learn a few different languages. Yeah, it forces you to be good at this kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. For me, I navigated, I wouldn't even say different cultures necessarily, but also subcultures. So I grew up living in the US, but also I'm the daughter of Jamaican immigrants. So my parents immigrated to the United States from Jamaica. And that definitely was a very cultural experience. Grew up right outside of New York City. So grew up right outside of essentially like the westernized cultural mecca. So I grew up seeing a lot of different things. And I think that gave me an openness to culture, really personal side for me. My sister has autism, my oldest sister. So I had to grow up seeing the world through her lens as well, of not necessarily understanding the world through the way that I see it, but through the lens of a neurodiverse person. So when I think about all these things, as well as my faith, I grew up in the Christian church, like all of these things really set the tone for me being the type of person that I am, who relishes diversity and relishes newness. I'm a middle child, so I
Yeah,
always was,
I can feel you. I can feel you
not
on that
Malcolm in the
one.
middle, but Soraya in the middle. I was always torn between different things. Yeah. I was always torn between different things. So I think like when we look, like you said, it's very Sigmund Freud-ish, but it's true when we look at our childhoods reveal so much about us and reveal so much about who we are. And that's why I believe nothing is by chance. Everything is very intentional, because I've been talking to a lot of people and I know that childhoods do influence what we do growing up. So that's really cool.
Oh my God. Do you ever have those moments where you're doing something and you kind of realize, oh my God, this goes back to my childhood. Like, oh, child me would have loved this, you know?
I have all those moments all the time. Like, listen, I wanted to be a writer growing up, and I was a business student doing journalism on the side. So that just shows you that like our childhood dreams never leave us. And they only, I would always say, they only re-evolve into different dreams, but they never really leave us. Okay, but speaking of dreams, I want to talk about like what your educational studies in Syria and Algeria taught you. So, like, as the young Wafa, as the young dreamer that you were, when you compare your educational studies in Syria or Algeria, like, what did these studies and the location of your studies teach you about how to define your career or your early career as you moved forward?
I think I told you about this before, but it was such a distinction between the schooling system back in Syria and here in Algeria. And I don't know if it was because it was an international school with a few different cultures, and that kind of forced us to assimilate to learning a lot of things. But here back in Algeria, since the system is quite inherited from colonialism, you know, we were colonialized by the French for a while, for more than 150 years, and we inherited their schooling system. I mean, back in Syria, it was a lot of it was based on the love of learning. I'd say it was a lot of different classes and not necessarily kind of STEM based um, or kind of you know, it was a lot of learning how to sew, for example. We did home ec, which I know doesn't exist here in Algeria. The system was very based on English because that's kind of the first language that's introduced there before French. Um, it was based on a lot of like language classes. So we did Spanish. We even had Greek lessons for a while. So that kind of forced me to acknowledge my creativity, even though as a child I wasn't quite creative, to be honest. But that kind of forced me to be more creative. And then moving back here to Algeria, like I said, the system is kind of inherited from the French. It's based on a lot of like they love STEM over here. If you're good at STEM, if you're good at math, physics, if you're good at memorization, you're kind of an A student. And I did struggle a bit when I came back. You know, back in Syria, I was a A student. I always did good. I was always kind of on the top of my class. And when I moved back here, I just kind of failed for a few years just because the system was based on French. It was kind of really based on having a good memory, having, you know, a good understanding of math, physics. Yeah, so it was kind of a big jump, but I would say I'm grateful because it kind of forced me to be good at both aspects. And even though I did end up doing my studies in something non-technical, but I think I really grew when it comes to the technical part. I had to kind of force my brain to learn math, to learn physics, to be more analytical in my thinking, and I think that it's a thing that benefited me in my current career.
Yeah. So you're talking about the balancing of the right and the left brain. And I think that a lot of us, some people, you know, there's some theories that say, well, some people are more right brain, so they lean more towards one side. Like, oh, like I'm a creative person, I'm allergic to math. Like I remember in high school, I'm not sure if this was a true diagnosis, but he would talk about being allergic to math, and he actually brought up the word that he used to say that he was allergic to math. And I was like, wow, really? But when you think of it, you know, today he's a chef, he's a creative by nature, and he transforms food into literally, he takes food and makes it into a palatable experience, like a sensory experience, from the plating to the taste to everything to the flavors and the textures. He's an artist. He's a food artist and chef architect, I would say. So a lot of us think that we are one side, but I'm grateful that you had the ability to merge both sides eventually, to find a way to develop both sides. It sounds like what happens in Algeria is happening now in the United States, where people are saying, well, STEM is the way. You know, there's a lot of like, I don't want to say STEM snobbery, because I personally think STEM is important, but all the subjects are important. And I think that like you're going to talk about your experience as a product manager. I know that unites both the left and the right brain. I know you have to think both creatively and analytically. And I think today in the 21st century, many careers are both creative and analytical. So we do need both, and I'm grateful that your childhood and your upbringing gave you both. But I do want to talk about the right side. of the brain a little bit. I want to talk about your career as a journalist because I think that that sets the foundation for number one, your articulation. You're articulating very well today, but it also set the tone for I think who I believe you to be, which is an empathetic communicator that really has a way with words and a way with expressing herself. So I want to know like what drove your initial interest in journalism. If you could speak about that, that would be great.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. I've always had the dream of being a journalist, even ever since I was a kid, to be honest. I think if you tell my family what's kind of the earliest memories when it came to me and reading and books and even kind of newspapers, they tell you back in the day, I would buy each day's newspaper and I would kind of read it from front page to end page, even not skipping even like the small ads, that come in the yeah, so that was kind of my obsession ever since I was young. I did lose it a bit throughout high school. In high school, I did think I would, maybe continue with English or something fun, like art or psychology or something like that. But then, this ties back on what we were saying about you have a dream when you're a kid and then it just follows you into kind of adulthood. When I had to choose my major for college, journalism just called to me, to be honest. Yeah, so I did, like I said, I did my master's in public relations and communication. I ended up doing an internship for a local newspaper here in Algeria. And yeah, I was, as an intern, you get stuff like piled on you. I had to do coffee runs. I was kind of a secretary, I would call it, for a while. And afterwards, I just gained kind of their trust and they let me write the international news column for a few months. Yeah. So that was quite fun. I wrote the international news column. I covered kind of world events day by day. I also contributed to the other sections of the newspaper. So I did culture. I even did sports for a while, which was quite fun. As a journalist, here, especially here in Algeria, you kind of have the creativity to follow a few different things. So I would attend events. I would interview people in the specific time period that I was working there. We had the elections, parliament elections. So, you can imagine me not even graduating from college and having to attend these fancy banquets and stuff with parliament people and interviewing them. So, yeah, it was kind of a dream come true, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking a lot about like the intern to the actual writer. Thank you for highlighting that process of going from like being the coffee and bagel person to actually getting to write and flex your skills. And journalism is such a relational industry. It's one that you have to develop roots in to really go far. So you'll see people be like career journalists and they will spend their entire life really chasing that editor spot, chasing that editor in chief spot. But I'm grateful that you really got to experience what it was like to start from that stage. And that's how I know you're really passionate about it because you were doing the like, hey, I've come here to write, but I'm running for coffee. Like you were actually doing the things that you needed to do to get their trust, you know?
Oh my God, you don't even know. Yeah, it was so hard during that time because I was also writing my master thesis. So I would do school during the day and then I would go in the evening and do more kind of internship stuff. Then I would go at night and write my thesis. And that went on for around 6 months. But I was so like sold on the dream. Like, when you're doing something that you enjoy, it doesn't even feel like a job. Not to sound like too much of a capitalist, but when you enjoy it, you really don't feel like it's it's something like that tires you, I would say.
I agree. When you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like a job. I mean, podcast listeners know my story and how my love for entrepreneurship threw me into what I do. My love for podcasting and speaking with people and connecting with people threw me into this. So I would say like we're aligned with that like your childhood dreams, they always follow you and your passions and the things that you love, they always follow you. But you did make that leap, right? You had that master's in communications, you had the journalism career, you went from intern to actual columnist, but you still made that leap. So I want to know, like, what defined your desire to move from journalism into startups in tech? And what was the moment when you knew you had to make that change, when you knew, like, I need to shift and maybe find something else to funnel my creativity in?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, um, going back to kind of the distinction between doing something, dreaming about becoming something else, and actually taking the leap to do it. The defining moment for me, I would say, because I did journalism for around a year and a half before jumping into kind of fintech and tech as a whole. I had an interview with a couple of startup founders, and the guy I was interviewing, he was quite successful, in his own realm, and he was talking about he had a similar background, so he did something non-technical. He did it for a couple of years, and then he jumped into tech, and he was talking about this joy that it brings him to build products that people can use, and that kind of resonated with me so much that I thought, oh my God, I want to be like him. I want to do something as meaningful, that's impactful as him. And that kind of manifested for me in being a product manager. Because I feel like with product managers, you get like you get ownership over the product. So yeah, so that was kind of the jumping point for me from being a journalist, even though I loved it. I love the work, to kind of the tech realm.
How I would define this transition is you went from Wafa, the individual contributor, to wanting to be the leader, wanting to, you're talking about ownership. So wanting to have that sense of, you could say creative ownership and creative control that product management affords you. And also like, that founder that you spoke to, most entrepreneurs that I meet have his background. They came from a non-technical perspective. And I think there's this myth that I do want to demystify for the listeners right now that, oh, if I work in tech, I need to be a technical person immediately. I need to have had that experience. And the truth is, no, we live in like this AI age, but we also live in a no code age where you can actually build your own startup with artificial intelligence tools. I believe OpenAI is launching, yes, insider information. No, it's not. They talked about it at the OpenAI conference or summit, but OpenAI is actually launching a technology where you can build your own apps on the platform and test your own app ideas. So now really is the time to step into tech. And I think it's wonderful that you met somebody who inspired you to take that creativity and transfer it. I think like these skills are transferable. We were talking a lot today about like our childhood dreams staying with us, but I would also say our gifts and our talents stay with us and our foundation stays with us. And it goes into many different contexts. I always tell people you can have 10 jobs and excel at 10, not all at the same time, but you can excel at 10. And I think that takes the pressure off of us, feel like we need to have one path, but more so focusing on what are the talents that I have? What are the passions that I have? And being driven by that, we can find ourselves in different contexts excelling just through those, what I call transferable talents. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's so true. And I've been kind of, this subject has been kind of going on in my friend circle for a while, just because I have some friends that have been in domains for a while working there, and they say, oh my God, Wafa, I want to be in tech. Because it's kind of so glamorized at the moment. People think it's the to be in. And their main struggle or kind of hesitancy at the moment is, oh, I'm not technical. Like going back to the subject being STEM oriented or not, they say, oh, I'm not good at math, I can't code. And I always tell them, like, oh my God, you've been doing, for example, market research for I don't know how many years. Look at your resume and look how many transferable skills that would just kill in a tech role. And yeah, I don't think people realize how much there's a gap in the tech market for
Speak about that.
non-technical
Speak about
people.
that.
Yeah,
There
for
is a gap
sure.
for non-technical people because soft skills matter, and not just soft skills, but qualitative research skills matter. Being able to talk to customers and understand their pain points, that matters. Being able to market a product effectively. Unfortunately, because of how we're socialized, the technical people often suck at everything else. And you probably have that experience too of like, technical people being specialists within their thing, to become a master coder and a master software engineer, you have to be a specialist. You have to be a specialist and someone who practices one thing usually. So they tend to be very centered and focused. So, like you said, there's a gap for people with those marketing skills, with those sales skills, with those product management skills, with those skills that are more holistic and integrative rather than specialists. And I think that's the beauty of the tech field. There is room for so many people in a way that we've never seen before, so many different mindsets and facets. And I think that's what's making tech so popular, as well as these TikToks of the tech employees showing us how luxurious their lives are
Day in my
all the
life. Yeah, yeah.
time.
It's so
They do not
glamorized.
fail to show us the inside of, working at Google or Facebook or Meta or any of these places. They do not fail to show us the insides and outsides of tech. So I really do love that. So I want to know, like, tell us about your current job in product management. Like, what do you like about that job, and why do you think it is a purposeful profession for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say looking at my resume, and this is funny because over the last few months, I've been having kind of interviews, and I have had recruiters look at my resume and they've been like, oh my God, you're quite jumpy. They've been like, oh my God, you spent 3 months at this company and then you spent 3 months at the other company. Like, what's happening? Tell me. Now I'll tell them, oh my God, it's not intentional from my part. Because I think for us or our generation, we prosper and we value the fact that we can be jumpy and you learn in each experience that you have. And especially as a project manager or a project owner, you get to work on a few different fields and you get to build these fun products and you can move on. Going back to your question, yeah, my current job. So I'm a project manager at CSA Research, which is it's an American research firm. We do market research for it's a niche, very niche market. I'd say it's LSPs and language specialized companies. So, for example, imagine any kind of company. We can take, for example, TikTok, and TikTok wants to expand in a few different countries all over the world, but something that they need to keep in mind is the fact they need to translate the content, translate the app, translate their marketing material. So my company helps with creating research papers to kind of advertise to other companies. These, for example, here we have TikTok, and we kind of create these protocols and practices they can follow. So as a project manager, my main job is kind of to lead the technical team to build these products. So my focus is mostly data products, as well as kind of analytical products, I would say. We're working on a few different fun subjects. It all sounds kind of niche when you talk to people about it. You say LSPs and they're like, oh, what's that? But overall, I get to lead technical teams to build these products. I get to work with engineers and software developers to kind of customize our products and services, as well as help our analytics and yeah, that's kind of the job, and I love it. I love it. It's been so fun. And you think as a product owner, you want to work in something that it's more tech forward, but sometimes even these analytical products and yeah, you get so much creativity to kind of build what you want and what you think is going to be useful.
Thank you for sharing about your work, and thank you for sharing about how meaningful it is. So, yes, y'all, when TikTok wants to expand, they call on people like Wafa, okay, who help them to think about the different cultural contexts that they're operating in. Because the truth is, we know that TikTok is called ByteDance in China, right? So there's like a whole different cultural context in the Chinese market that isn't existing in the American or the UK or a more westernized market. So, yes, social media firms have to adapt. They have to adapt and adjust to different cultures. So I think it's great that you're at this end of what you call like analytical project management. You're at this end of really being able to use your skill set. And once again, bringing it back to your childhood, intercultural competence, right? To think about how to help companies to have a foothold in diverse markets. That's a wonderful job. That is a wonderful opportunity. And I could definitely tell like it is definitely a lot of fun for you. I want to hop onto this comment about the person who told you that you're jumpy. And I kind of want to clap back on them if I can. You're Gen Z like me. And we are known for being like non-committal to jobs. I mean, literally, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the discourse, but there's so much out there about Gen Z, like not committing to jobs or like just not caring about jobs at all. Like, it's like, oh, Gen Z will quit if you tell them that they're late, or Gen Z will cry in the car and put a TikTok about how abusive this job is. And like Gen Z's like the nightmare of the workplace. But if we look back on it, so were millennials, right? If we look back on it, so were, Gen X. Like there was always this, like, they're coming in to change things. And I think one of the beauties of being Gen Z is that we are the anti like boomer. Honestly, we're anti like, you need to stay in one place. We actually care about work that respects us and values us. I run a startup, and even for this podcast, I manage Gen Z and Gen Alpha. You got to give them their space. Like, you got to make them do them. And I think a lot of people don't understand how to do that, how to manage with a light touch, which is really what Gen Z and Gen Alpha wants. They want a sense of freedom and accomplishment. And I think that can result in being a job hopper, but that's not a bad thing. We're just living in a new age where, if you leave your job, there's a million and one other jobs on LinkedIn, Handshake. You can find a job on Instagram. You can find a job anywhere now. And then with remote work, we've transformed the way that we connect. You don't have to be in the same room to work and collaborate with somebody. So we're just living in an age of opportunities. And I wouldn't even say you're jumpy. I would say you're forward thinking and goal oriented. You're not going to stay in a place that you feel like no longer serves you. And I have to say, I'm the same way. That's why I jumped and became an entrepreneur, because I realized if I didn't, I'd be running from every job I had because I didn't like traditional work. And I think that's the cool thing about being Gen Z. Like, we can embrace that about ourselves. So the person that told you that you're jumpy, I just want to tell them it's not jumpy. It's forward thinking, and it is so Gen Z, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, I do love the fact that we're non-committal to work. I mean, not in the sense that that you don't love what you do, but in the sense that you don't stay in a situation that doesn't serve you. And I've had that over the last few years. You go to a place and you stay a couple months, and you face nothing but kind of resistance and disrespect. And at certain points, at the beginning of my career, I would say I was very quiet, and I kind of forced myself to just accept it. But as I grow older and older, I think to myself, why should I kind of withstand this? Why should I stay at somewhere that doesn't serve me? Even if it's kind of disrespect from the people I work with, or the work itself doesn't bring me any joy anymore, I can just jump. And then, like you said, there's so much room for opportunities, especially if you know how to kind of advertise yourself well and you're good at what you do. The chances and the job opportunities, they come on their own. To be honest, at this point, I don't remember the last time I had to kind of formally interview at some place. You get kind of DMs from HR people, and as I feel like when you're competent, that just shows.
Yeah, exactly. We're living in an age where, like you said, recruiters are coming to people, and that's really changing the landscape. And I totally agree with everything that you said. I think that the landscape is changing, and we are given more opportunities than our forefathers and foremothers have been given, and that's a beautiful thing. That's not something that we should be, hiding from, or feeling bad about. That's a beautiful and wonderful thing, and I think we're stepping into a new career age. I even, like, when I was going through my career ruts, before I decided to do entrepreneurship, I saw so many videos where people were talking about not dreaming of labor. And I began to realize, I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to call Gen Z the wanderlust generation. I think we have a great sense of wanderlust, not in a bad way, but in a good way, in that we travel the most. We see the world the most. And because of that, we are so expansive in our vision and our identity that we're creating careers out of things that people never thought could be careers. If I could tell you how many travel bloggers I see making $5,000 to $10,000 US dollars a month, traveling the world. Like, people are doing things and finding jobs out of things that we never thought they'd find jobs out of. And I think that's why it's wonderful we have podcasts like these in this sort of culture and climate, because we're really trying to show and demystify what that looks like. But I want to know about your experiences in, speaking of that wanderlust, moving between journalism and tech. How are both industries different, or were there any similarities or any surprises along the way of moving in between both?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a big distinction about I mean, at least here in Algeria, I would say there's a big distinction about, or difference in journalism and tech as a whole. Tech here in Algeria has only been kind of prospering and expanding. I would say in the last 10 years or so. It's a very young market. I mean, we had a lot of international companies take base here in Algeria, and they expand, and you get kind of, the traditional, I would say, like software engineers and stuff like that. But as a startup scene, as a tech scene, it's quite young. in comparison to kind of the journalism field, it has been existing here in Algeria for so long. It's been decades. We have seasoned journalists. There's a lot of like structure. There's your big kind of house names, I would call them, where they attract the talent. I would say from my college, even almost all of our alumni is kind of based in a few different spaces. The career path is quite clear. But for tech, like I said, since it's quite young, especially in the startup scene, there's so much room for growth. Like even for the project manager or project owner role that has only been existing here in Algeria, or there's demand for it just in the last few years, to be honest. Before, people just kind of follow the structure, I would say. So that's where the distinction comes. As a journalist, like I said, you are forced to start as an intern and learn your way. You make your connections, and you hope that you get noticed. But in the tech scene, it just depends on your skills and competence. If you're good at what you do, you don't have to wait for a promotion for a year. If you're good at what you do, you'll just get promoted right away, and you'll shine. And yeah, I mean that's kind of the main differences.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think you're highlighting the difference between what we can call legacy industries versus more emerging industries. So, journalism, I guess we could say, back from like Aristotle and the Greeks, journalists have always existed, right? There have always been people that told us what was happening, that announced what was happening out into the world. And journalism, I would call, is a legacy industry. Yes, it has evolved into digital media, but there have always been people covering the news in the United States, even going back to like the Pilgrims coming to the U.S. Like there were papers printed about the things that were happening in the city. So there always were people like recording things and writing things down, and almost like the journalists are the historians of society. Like they make sure that the events that we have aren't just passing experiences, but that they're documented. So that role has always been played, even within ancient African societies. If we look at like hieroglyphics and the things that were recorded by ancient Egyptians, there was always somebody scribing, recording things and events. So that's always existed. But I think tech hasn't always existed, especially in this form. So there's this non-linear way of developing things and products and projects. And I'm sure you're familiar with like agile project management, literally taking away traditional ways of linear thinking. It literally is agile, it moves like water. So we're living in a different age when it comes to work. And I'm grateful that you were able to highlight the difference between working in a legacy industry like journalism versus a more emerging industries like tech, for example, tech startups, especially, which tend to be very non traditional. I know for a fact, tech startups are like we're running into a burning house if you're working for a tech startup, specifically one in that Silicon Valley type of mindset. But it's exciting. It's exciting. It's like a fire hose of work, but it's exciting because there's opportunity to create something new and really create something out of nothing. So that's something that's very, very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about your opinion on just like being right brain or left brain. I think that like that's something that I want to talk about, and before we end, kind of run home. So what advice do you think you would give to someone who considers himself to be more right brain and creative? Like how do you think they can translate that creativity into a career in the technical field?
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, I love what you said about how there's such a big gap for non-technical creative people here in the field, just because the technical people are very poor when it comes to human. I want to say human connection because I don't want to offend anyone, but they're quite, they lack when it comes to the human touch, how they communicate with each other. Sometimes I have people telling me, oh, you oversee technical teams. What does that mean? Can't they just talk to each other? And there's a disconnect where with developers, if you let them be, they'll just focus on what they do and they won't talk to anyone. There's no connection within the team within itself or with the stakeholders or anything like that. So that's where kind of the non-technical people need to come and enforce those rules and enforce this constant communication and events. You mentioned agile. We do these kind of stand-ups in the morning where we just talk to each other, and that creates the team spirit within us. Going back to your question, I mean, like I said, there's a big gap. I feel like for anyone that's non-technical and they want to transition into tech, the first thing that you would need to do is just, I'd say, grab your resume, underline any transferable skills that you think would be beneficial in the field. If you think that you being a good writer can translate well, underline that because that's true. There's so much gaps for technical writers, for example, someone that's good at describing details and putting like pen to paper. If you're a good communicator, that's beneficial, that can help. If you're good at creating or resolving conflict, that's also good. If you're good at maybe pointing out mistakes or being very detail oriented, that would excel in a QA tester role because all you have to do is just sit there and point out the mistakes. You know, so I really want people to kind of not be intimidated when it comes to the field. And something else that comes to mind, because just because I've been having these conversations with my friends, when people imagine tech, they imagine coding, sitting in front of the computer, creating products. But there's so many subcategories of tech. You can work in fintech, you can work in edtech if you have any educational kind of experience. You can work in, I don't know, there's so many, you can work in medtech if you have any medical experience. There's so many kind of pockets that are within tech itself that are just lacking and asking for more non-technical people to join. And I think really people need to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Wow. I think I totally agree. I agree with what you're saying. And I also love the fact that you literally made it plain for people. You're like, hey, like take out your resume and literally highlight every single skill that you feel like can be transferable. And I love that you talked about the soft skills that we often overlook. The being able to sit down and really resolve conflict. Do you know how many engineering teams are like constantly squabbling and fighting? Or even as a product manager, and I want to kind of get into that too, the intersections of things that you work at, right? I think I don't know if it's the same in the Algerian context, but in the US context, product managers work at the intersection of many different things, from marketing to tech to UX design. Fun fact, I actually got my certificate in UX design. So yes, I actually have studied UX design. It's one of those things where I began to realize, so I was actually in an app building thing, and I wasn't really building my app, I was designing the app. And everyone was like, well, you're just good at design. And I'm like, really, am I? And I struggled to see myself because I never was an artist. I never could draw growing up. But what I have to realize is I have an eye for color. I have an eye for unique palettes, color palettes and combinations and font combinations. And so I was like, oh, shoot, and I'm a bit of a decent writer. So UX writing is something that I love to do. And I've been able to use that in developing the products for Identity, my tech nonprofit. So I think like, we can, my life is a testament to what you're saying. Like, you might not see yourself as a traditional person, but there's UX design, there's product marketing, there's product management, there's different areas that you can shine in. Even as a non-technical person, don't think you have to code. I mean, there's folks coming in as engineers, switching to product managers, switching to other paths because they realize like, hey, I can code, but this is more fun. Go to what makes you feel alive. There's a lot of research roles. There's AI research, great for people who are into cognitive science and neuroscience and large language models. There's so much happening in tech that I think no one should be in a role that they hate. There's so much opportunity there, like people should actually think about what they love. So I want to end with this question. We probably have a lot of aspiring product managers listening right now, and they're like, hey, like I really admire Wafa. I want to be like her. I want to be a product manager. You work in product management. So first and foremost, define what makes a product management or a product manager role more distinctive or separate from a software engineer role. And then last but not least, how does someone know if they would make a good product manager? Like what skills should they have?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's an excellent question. And you know what? I feel like the big distinction when it comes to being a software engineer or developer and being a product manager is having very, I would say, customer oriented views. So you really have to kind of step into the shoes of your client or your user, and you really need to build your product surrounding that, if that makes sense, in a in a kind of short sentence, if I can kind of resume that. Software engineers really do the building. And they're such a big part of the process, because if we didn't have software engineers or developers, who would build a product? We would just have product requirements and documentation and no product to within itself. Um, yeah, but they overlap in the fact that we all are very client oriented, so we put ourselves in the shoes of the client. The product manager, I would say, does more overseeing of the technical team. So you often would have a smaller technical team arranging from, I would say, six, maybe three to even 8 or 12 people, composed of kind of software engineers that are front end, someone that's doing the back end. You have your UX UI designers, and you would work with a few different departments to build your product. And the job of a product manager will be overseeing the technical team, making sure that we have a clear roadmap. So, how your product is going to be built, that the work is broken down into a few different kind of increments, and there's a few different iterations, so it's more manageable. The job also is composed of a lot of talking with either your technical team or your stakeholders. Stakeholders, for example, your CEOs, people that really expect deliverables from you, to see what features or specs that are lacking or wanting you to build. And then you go back to your technical team and you see if that's actually achievable. I would say a lot of the job is just talking to clients and users, trying to put yourself in their shoes, not to kind of say that a lot of times. You're doing a lot of user interviews, seeing what they like about the product, seeing what they don't like, what the pain points that can be kind of addressed. It's a lot of looking at data to see what's kind of your user path is and how you can adjust your product according to that. So I would say there's a big kind of distinction, but they also overlap, because you can have software engineers, like you said, that turn product managers. They get the technical sense, so they know how to run things when it comes to code. They know how to do kind of take the team from conception to staging to production to launching the thing. But you also can have like non-technical product owners or project managers like me, who are more involved in the kind of the planning, making sure that the roadmap is clear, that we have our backlogs, and that everything is organized, and yeah, that the product is really being kind of customized, because it's really bespoke. It's a bespoke case for each project manager, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for defining that a product can be anything, not necessarily a technical product, but anything that involves, I would say, the coordination of multiple pieces to create an end result. So we can think of physical products, we could think of work products, we could think of analytical products, such as a slide deck or a strategic plan. Like the product is really anything that results in a culmination of efforts to achieve a particular result. Thank you, Wafa. Really do appreciate this time. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for this episode. I think it is wonderful, and it's going to be a wonderful experience for the listeners. Do you have any parting thoughts or words you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. I want to say thank you for first, just for hosting me, and creating this kind of welcoming space. I love the fact that you are bringing in guests from a few different backgrounds. I love the fact that this feels more as a conversation. It's so much fun, and yeah, just thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk about my own experience. I think. Uh, it feels kind of funny, because I think of myself as someone just starting out in the workforce. I've been only working for 5 years now, but I do think people kind of, there's a gap, and people miss the fact that even though if you can have like a shorter amount of experience, but there's so much that you can bring to the table. And I just hope that if someone is out there listening to this episode, they can kind of benefit from any advice or any this blabbering that I've been doing.
Yeah, 100%. I always say the purpose of professional is for the seekers and the teachers, okay? It is for everyone. And for that reason, we do look for people early in their career like you. I'm actually only a year into my career. So we are fresh, like literally fresh off the college boat or a grad school boat into what we're doing. But yeah, we look for the seekers and the teachers. We believe that younger people are those seeking knowledge, but they can also teach knowledge. So we also look for those regardless of their age, have a maturity to teach and to give other people the knowledge and drop the gems on career, purpose, professionalism, all the things we talk about. So yeah, you fell into that category, and I hope that you leave this conversation knowing the value and the power that you do have, because that's one thing I always want. I want for each guest to feel empowered, to know that they are a purposeful professional, irrespective of your background, irrespective of how many years you've done, what you're doing. If you're pivoting or if you're staying within one career, one lane, the power is always within you to live in purpose. So that's really why we have this podcast.
Thank you, Soria. This has been a blast,
All right. Thank you, y'all. We'll take care. See you. Woo! Wafa's conversation was so transformative for me. As I reflect upon the discussion we shared, it dawned on me that the core of who we are, our skills, our talents, our perspectives, are transferable skills that we can utilize in our work. I love this conversation and the takeaways on lessons from our cultures, childhood, and even formative work experiences, and how they can ultimately set us up for success in any path we choose. I don't know about you, but I'm optimistic and so grateful for this conversation. I am confident that all the purposefully professional career searchers and switchers who are listening will have a renewed outlook for what's possible when they take a leap of faith and ride with the waves of life. Special thanks to Wafa for your engagement and your willingness to share your inspirational and transformational career journey with us. All right, everybody. This is Saray from the Purposeful Professional Podcast, the podcast for your career, the people, and the culture. We're out. Until next time, bye.